reenactor. And for 36 years, I used everything I learned and everything I picked up as far as material goods for reenactment to bring history to life in my classroom. So I would wear the garb for whatever time period and culture we were studying. I would have the music playing in the background that would fit with what we were covering. I'd bring in the art, I'd bring in artifacts and realia, things that kids could touch, make it a kid-friendly experience. I'm not in the classroom anymore, so I'm repurposing myself. And what I'm involved in now is a very pretentious sounding Mission Odyssey, where I am wearing the garb for the events that I'm covering. I'm bringing that passion that I have for historical reenactment, bringing past to life. That's why I'm involved in that sort of thing on the weekends. I'm trying to preserve landmarks, or at least create a visual record of them. I'm playing history detective. So my Mission Odyssey, which has me visiting the missions, the Assistencias, spin-off missions, the Estancias, ranchos, and presidios, fortifications designed to protect the missions. Visiting each of these places while in garb and telling the stories of these places and trying to leave a visual record, because landmarks tend to go away. So what I'm doing today is I'm on my way back to Mission San Francisco de Asís, or more commonly known as Mission Dolores. I hope you stick with me on my journey. Buildings were being added to the 6th mission, which by 1791 was the 6th of 13 missions. The recently dedicated chapel became the south side of the quadrangle, with the convento connecting to a storehouse on the north wing. The buildings were roofed with tiles, including the neophyte quarters. The mission complex extended over several acres during the mission era. Dolores Lake and a stream which ran by the mission, which the Spanish named Arroyo de Nuestra Señora de los Dolores, supplied water for the mission. Half a league of zanjas or irrigation ditches were also dug around the potrero, pasture ground, and fields. None of the Bay Area missions achieved much in the way of agricultural production except missions Santa Clara and San Jose, which ranked second in the entire chain. Over the years, Mission Dolores, raising wheat, barley, corn, beans, and peas as the primary crops, placed in the lower third of mission producers. The mission built its livestock herd from 826 head to over 20,000 animals during its peak years, 1803 to 1814, but dropped well below that by the time of secularization. One of the problems with Mission Dolores was because where it was located, the climate wasn't the best. The Alani who lived in the area, they lived in seasonal villages, so they would leave at certain times of the year. But the Padres insisted, no, you guys stay here. You stay at the mission. And, instead of hunting and gathering, you guys are going to practice agriculture. Well, that wasn't really working out so well. So it was decided in 1786 to create an assistencia, basically a sub-mission or an outpost mission, and this was intended to grow up into being a full-fledged mission. And so far I've covered like 9 of these in the series. This is one of those 9. This was created as the Asistencia San Pedro y San Pablo, and it's in present-day Pacifica. And by the way, the building behind me, that wasn't there as part of the Asistencia. That was created later. Apparently some of the adobe bricks were from the original Asistencia, but Here's what the actual Assistencia was supposed to be. If you'll notice the logs, they outline a U-shaped Assistencia. Most of the missions were done as quadrangles. This one was missing a side. And there's a couple of granaries in here, like in this area. A kitchen that basically just had, it was like a covered walkway. Padres' quarters are in there. So here's a diagram. First there was the chapel, then came the granary, and then you've got Padres' quarters and the kitchen and a tack room and another granary, because remember, this is about raising food. And the purpose of this Assistencia was to grow crops, and they were also going to raise animals, raise livestock, and this was to also spread the faith. It also served as a convenient rest stop between Mission Santa Cruz and Mission Dolores. The problem is, in 1791, only 5 years later, from the start of this Assistencia, plague hit the area and many Alani died. The population's going to drop, I guess because some of them also felt, oh, I'm not hanging around, this is dumb, and they left. And so the remaining people ended up shifting over to raising livestock. And some people say that this Assistencia may have closed down like 2 years after that. Some people say it may have closed down like around the time of secularization, 1834. Some people say somewhere in between. Okay, back up to San Francisco and down to our next stop in San Mateo, 24 miles away. The second Assistencia that Mission Dolores ended up creating was in San Mateo. I'm basically on the site of where it once was, at the corner of El Camino Boulevard and Baywood. There used to be a marker here. Used to be designated as a state landmark. It's not here anymore. All right, it's all built over, and even that landmark's missing, or the plaque is missing. But this was the second Assistencia created, and that must have been really interesting as far as the people at the mission, the neophytes at Mission Dolores were concerned, because they did not get along well at all with the folks from San Mateo, and this is before the Assistencia was established, so there must have been some major politicking going on. But this Assistencia was established in order to raise cattle, bring the faith, but it was also a convenient stop for the Padres and those traveling up the Camino Real from Mission Santa Clara to Mission Dolores. Originally, native Californian settlements in the San Francisco area were largely seasonal, with tribes moving to avoid the cold and damp seasons. With the coming of the mission, the native Californians were asked to stay full-time. Despite the cheerfulness of a painting of Danciolone painted by Luis Andreevich Choris in 1816, there was little to be joyful about at the mission. The cold and damp weather, predation by Presidio Soldados de Guerra, and the lure of better life across the bay caused many instances of neophytes running away from the mission. In the year 1796 alone, some 200 tried to run away, and soldados were sent to retrieve them. Sadly, when Padres Martí de Landeta and Antonio Dante replaced Padre Paulo, Padre Landate was noted for being particularly cruel and mistreated the neophytes. His actions, along with a couple of other priests at other missions, formed the basis of many charges of mistreatment against the Franciscans. Runaway neophytes were a considerable problem for Mission Dolores, and in fact for all the missions, but the ones that ran away from Mission Dolores apparently caused trouble over at Mission Santa Clara, Mission San Jose, and they would try to get any non-Christian Indians to, don't go down that path, don't hang out with these guys. And it got so severe that in 1819 there was a military expedition sent to punish runaway neophytes and any of their allies. And something like 27 were killed, 20 wounded, 16 captured. So that doesn't necessarily mean neophytes being recaptured. It could have been some of those who weren't neophytes. And that figure was lumped in with 49 horses that were captured and taken. And eventually you're going to see that the military is going to be ill-equipped to handle any sort of rebellion amongst the natives. Now in the 1820s, we're going to get to have more controversy, and this time it's arguments between padres. When the Asistencia of San Rafael was created, that was created for a lot of the sick neophytes that were at Mission Dolores. The population of Mission Dolores is going to drop from over 1,200 to a little over 200 because a lot of those neophytes ended up being shipped over to Mission San Rafael. Well, Asistencia San Rafael. Well, now Asistencia San Rafael is going to be upgraded to mission status. There's a padre named Altamira. He is formerly of Mission Dolores, but now he's going to be the padre in charge of Mission San Francisco Solano, which is going to be the last mission built. And it's also going to be the only Mexican mission. All the rest of them were Spanish. So this one's built after Mexican independence. Padre Altamira is really pushing the idea that, hey, look at the population of Dolores. Look at the population of San Rafael. Why don't we just shut down those two missions, and then we'll make Mission San Francisco Solano the mission for the Bay Area, for north of the Bay. And Padre Amoros, Mission San Rafael, gets into it, and there's a huge argument about this, and finally it's decided, no, we're going to keep all three missions. Let's just leave things the way they are. That's all right. 9 years later, secularization happens. Now, in 1834, secularization begins, and this is going to affect all the missions. But even before secularization had begun, things are already deteriorating over at Mission Dolores. In 1835, secularization officially starts happening at the mission, and Joaquin Estudio is made the commissioner in charge, and he was supposed to conduct a survey and evaluate all the property. And mission property, by the way, would have extended all the way through like the holdings of the Asistencias. So you would have the area of Pacifica that, Asistencia San Pedro y San Pablo had, and also the Asistencia in San Mateo. And a lot of this land was supposed to have been divided up amongst the neophytes, amongst the Christianized Indians. Well, if that ever happened, there's no record of it. And pretty much secularization was the death knell for all the missions. There was also one more twist of the knife as to the fate of Mission Dolores. In 1835, a petition was granted for the creation of a commercial town, and that would be Yerba Buena, and that would be right beside the Presidio. That would grow up to be San Francisco. After the Mexican War, which made California a part of the United States, the California Gold Rush hit, flooding the state with immigrants seeking their fortune. The remote community around the Mission, connected to the city by 2 plank roads, became a bustling site. Mission properties were used for saloons and gambling, and even racetracks were built. Bullfights and other spectacles entertained the crowds. Over time, the district was incorporated into a more respectable town area. Following a U.S. Land Office survey in 1854, some of the land belonging to the Mission was returned to the Catholic Church by President James Buchanan 4 years later. Even so, while a portion of the Mission Convento was converted into a 2-story wing for use as quarters for priests and as a seminary, the north end of the convento was developed into Mansion House, a stop for travelers. Over time, it housed a brewery, 2 taverns, a dancing room, a saloon, private lodgings, and a hospital. Before 1876, the Mansion House and half the convento had been razed, and a Gothic Revival church was built next to and north of the Mission Church. The church was dedicated on July 4th, 1876 to mark the Mission Centennial, and it was built to deal with the much larger population of San Francisco. By 1898, the rest of the convento was gone to make room for an additional wing of the basilica, which was being constructed as of 1906. It was never completed. On April 18, 1906, at 5:12 a.m., San Francisco was rocked by an estimated 7.9 magnitude earthquake. While the earthquake itself caused much damage, including some to the old Mission, devastating fires soon broke out in the city and lasted for several days. More than 3,000 people died, and over 80% of the city of San Francisco was destroyed, much consumed by those fires. The fire headed up the hill towards the Mission. Firefighters dynamited the convent across the street from the Mission, but the fire still jumped the street to the Gothic church alongside the Mission and damaged it to the extent that it later had to be razed. By some miracle, the original adobe Mission Church was spared, and the fire advanced no further. Construction began on a replacement for the Gothic church in 1913, but was delayed by World War I, and what is now known as Mission Dolores Basilica was completed in 1918. It underwent further remodeling in 1926. In 1952, Pope Pius XII had elevated Mission Dolores to the status of a minor basilica. This was the first designation of a basilica west of the Mississippi and the 5th basilica named in the United States. Today, the larger, newer church is called Basilica of Mission San Francisco de Asís, or Mission Dolores Basilica, while the original adobe structure retains the name of Mission Dolores. 19 missions accomplished. 9 asistencias documented, a couple of estancias, 3 presidios, and I'm on my way to the 4th one, El Presidio Real de San Francisco. I hope you stick with me on my journey.